I hope you had yourself an amazing Wednesday. It is the 31st of July 2024, 1901 East African time, and this is the Black Hot Fire updates, of course, with me, Dimore. I'm going to be telling you about each and everything that was happening throughout the whole of Africa today, all the headline hitters, what was making headlines where. I'm going to be looking at several things, including the Rwandanese Burundi conflict that has been going on and how they've now announced a ceasefire. Looks like it was actually announced in Angola, where Angola announced a ceasefire deal between DR Congo and Rwanda. And you might wonder, has DR Congo and Rwanda been fighting? Really? But the other day they said that Rwandanese forces were fighting in DRC alongside M20, the M23 rebels. So looks like there's going to be a ceasefire. I'm going to be telling you about all that, of course. I'm also going to be telling you about what is happening in Benin with some insecurity cases going on in Benin. Like most African countries, especially from that region has been experiencing a lot of economic and security crisis, sponsored crisis, of course. We're going to be looking at that in a minute. So going to be looking at Sudan. Sudan is another country of interest because Sudan is one of the richest countries you will ever meet in Africa. I don't know how many barrels of oil do they produce in a day, in a year? Millions of barrels. It's a very oil-rich country, and that is why it has always been hit by crisis after crisis after crisis, with the latest one being the one that is happening between the rapid support forces and the government forces. And of course, there was a talk to lay down arms that was happening in Geneva. Ironic, happening in Geneva. But now I'm going to be telling you about how even a Sudanese general by the name of Al Burhan survived a drone attack. Even as they're talking about ceasefire, they are still trying to assassinate Sudan's top commander, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Survived a drone attack on a military graduation ceremony that killed 5 people. So I don't know what is not happening. Maybe he is against the peace deal. I don't know why they want to get rid of him at a time where it looks like they want to get rid of to stop the war. It looks like they've completed their business in Sudan, and for that reason they are calling for a ceasefire in Sudan. So we're going to be looking also at China. China got into an agreement, a partnership agreement, with 26 African countries in what there's a forum that has just been concluded. It was the Forum on China-Africa Digital Cooperation. It has just ended, and the end result was China and 26 African countries agreeing to strengthen partnership in the digital field. Ties with what we were talking about in Tubonge earlier today, where a Kenyan media house laid down how many people? 300 people in a single day, because apparently it looks like AI and the digital landscape is going to lay so many people jobless in the near future. And now China wants to capitalize on this upcoming field, that is the field of the digital landscape. Looks like China wants to capitalize on the digital landscape, the digital field. That is why it had this China Africa forum. These forums are too many for even one to keep count of. Looks like now every now and then there's this forum. I don't know, the China forum on food, China forum on democracy, Russian forum, and they're all revolving around Africa. So neocolonialism still trying to share here and there. Reminds me of the Berlin. Was it the Berlin conference, or what was the first conference that they had during the scramble for independence, where they were dividing Africa? They were partitioning. They used the word partition, but really they were dividing Africa like a piece of cake. Talking about, I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna be taking this country. Portugal talking about the country is going to take. It was the Berlin conference, if I'm not wrong, of 1884, where they were dividing Africa. The Berlin conference of 1885 happened on the 15th of November 1884, and it concluded in 26th February 1885 with the signature General Act regulating European colonization. So the Berlin Conference was a conference to divide Africa. It was a meeting of major European powers to negotiate and formalize claims to territory in Africa. So Portugal could come out and say, I now have control over this and this country. So would the British people say that I now control Nigeria, you know. So looks like it's the same thing that is happening in the current contemporary world, you know, with all these forums. For example, that was when Portugal could come up and say, I own Cape Verde, I own Mozambique, I own Sao Tome, I own Angola. Those were some of the countries that were colonized by the Portuguese. So these forums remind me of that. They remind me of now a modern day Berlin conference. Only that now they are called forums. You hear of the African China Food Forum, and all African heads are gonna be there, and they're gonna be talking about bringing new seeds to Africa, fighting against this and fighting against that. Really reminds me of the Berlin conference, and it to me it's a modern day partitioning Africa and its resources, because the other day there was a conference on resources, was there not, where African leaders went and met with the European powers again to talk about how they want to invest. Was it the UK? They want to invest more in the extraction of African resources, because they feel like Africa has not been properly using its resources. So it's a modern day Berlin conference. Anyway, we're going to be looking at that. Apart from that, we're going to be looking at Mali, where 50 Wagner fighters were killed in an ambush. Mali, I already talked about how the three countries, one of the things that is going to happen in the three countries is there's going to be a lot of unrest, there's going to be a lot of wars, there's going to be a lot of sponsored chaos and attacks. There are going to be a lot of upcoming terrorist groups. I don't know, this one representing this representing this. Of course, because that is always the last playbook that they use whenever they feel outpowered. They create disunity, and in the disunity, as you are fighting against each other on a war that you don't even understand, because, for example, the war happening in Benin is a jihadist type of war where I'm fighting for my religion. So as you fighting, you are fighting, then I come and steal your resources. So this is going to happen more and more. They have to be. That was why the other day Kid was saying the best decision they can make, the three Sahel alliance countries, is form a military alliance that starts up. Forming is one thing. Operationalize a military unit. Have it fully equipped, fully operational. Let Mali not deal with the terrorist groups by itself. Let Niger not deal with terrorist groups as Niger. Let Burkina Faso not deal with terrorism as Burkina Faso, because that is not going to succeed. Because the amount of sponsored chaos that you're about to see in that region is going to be unprecedented. It's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of sponsored chaos in that region, with every other terrorist group coming up. There are going to be attempted coups every now and then. The master is really going to do all they can in an effort to harness back power, to take back power, because it's not a good thing when they are no longer in control. And of course, with the Sahel now inspiring more African countries to head into that route, and then they know if the Sahel is independent for some times, if they give Sahel 2-3 years of independence, fully independent like it is like right now, then it's going to be day and night in comparison. It's going to be a South Korea, North Korea type of situation. It's going to be day and night comparing, let's say, Niger and Nigeria, because it's going to be, the progress is going to be up there, you know, with good leadership and good policies, and without the colonization, the neo-colonization that is the big problem we have in Africa. So, of course, they can't allow for that to happen. That is why you're going to see more and more of these attacks. You're going to hear jihadist attacks, extremist groups all over fighting against this and that. A lot of wars without a head, and you know wars without agenda, meaningless wars are going to be happening, like the one happening in Sudan, like the one happening in DRC. So I do agree with Keith when he said the first step that those three countries should do is operationalize a military unit. Forming is one thing, but even the AU has a military unit. Is it operational? Even IGAD has a military unit. Even ECOWAS has a military unit. So forming is one thing, but having it fully equipped, fully ready for battle, fully operational is another thing, because it's gonna be easy to have a Sahel military unit dealing with terrorism and sponsored chaos than having Niger, for example, which is a country trying to build itself, not really a rich country, rich in minerals, but you look at its GDP, its per capita, its unemployment rate, its minimum wage, its living standard measure, that is the LSM. It's a poor country. The mineral richness has not yet reflected on the people. So we can't ignore the fact that it's a country that is trying to start from scratch, trying to rebuild itself. And when you're trying to rebuild yourself, then the last thing that you would want, the last obstacle that you would want is having political instability, because political instability doubles down on production. Nobody is going to work in a factory when there are gunshots sounding outside. Look at Somalia. Look at the economic situation in Somalia. Look at Central African Republic. Look at the economic situation there. Look at Ethiopia. Look at the economic situation there. So the insecurity is always a factor that they use to bring down the economy on its knees. So, for example, Niger, which is a poor country, looking at it, rich but poor, might never actually might never scale up, might never double up with the insecurity happening there, because now the production goes down, the supply chain is messed with. I mean, the commodities cannot leave the farms to go to the market. The miners cannot even be able to mine the minerals in peace. The gold mines will have to be closed down, and now the ones who steal will come, and the ones who we know who are notorious for exploiting African resources are going to be the ones exploiting the resources, because of, so it's not a good place to be when you are a country that is trying to get up on its knees, and then there's a there's instability happening. So that is why it is paramount that the Sahel form and operationalize a military unit. Otherwise, it might never reach its. You saw the other day Niger, it was still Niger trying to have its oil exported, and it couldn't because of the same. We were still having pipelines, and the pipelines would get destroyed. The pipelines would get vandalized. So they really need to unite on that front. They really need to act as a unit, and that is going to act as a trailblazer for the rest of Africa. The rest of Africa will look at it, and who knows, in the next couple of years, decades, we might have a fully operational African army. That is maybe after we've taken the Sahel route. I don't know. So in Mali, nearly 50 Wagner fighters were killed in an ambush. We cannot really be depending on Wagner fighters and Russian fighters, and we cannot be jumping from one master to the other thinking that we are liberating ourselves. That is not liberation, that is insanity. We can't be jumping from one master to the other thinking that this master is better than the last master. A master is a master, and a master has his interests first before any other interest. Russia has its interest first. It has interest in Mali. It has interest wherever you see it. It has interest. The first question that Putin and Russia and Wagners are going to ask themselves is, are we going to benefit from helping this country in whatever form, way, military support, food support? So this naivety of thinking that some leaders, some entities help Africans for philanthropist reasons is naivety, ignorance. Nobody is helping you for philanthropist reason. Whoever you see, I don't know, the Russian trying to kick out the French, it's the same people, it's the same masters, all, and you wouldn't really blame them because it's human to have personal interest at hand always. Even the reason Mali, the reason Niger, the reason Burkina Faso liberated itself was because of its own personal interest as a country. It wants to scale up. So you can't really blame them for having personal interest, but you have to blame yourself, of course, for not seeing through it. Are you thinking that this and this and this is happening for philanthropist reason? So we cannot keep depending on whichever forces from whichever country. We have to develop, we have to stop the naivety, you have to stop the ignorance and develop our own military. But anyway, we're going to be looking at that in a minute. And also, we're going to be looking at the Venezuelan presidential election. It's a point of interest for me, even though Venezuela is not in Africa, at what has been happening in Venezuela with the political crisis happening there, of course, with President Nicolas Maduro, who is said to have, we're going to be looking at what is happening here and why is the US, why is that the West, why is everybody so interested in Venezuela? Nobody was talking about Venezuela before this. Why then is Venezuela all of a sudden the point of interest? And of course, you're going to be looking at the political crisis that has been happening. And if you look at the toning, the reporting, and the algorithm on social media, then you're going to tell that the powers are against the President Nicolas Maduro. I don't know about this man. I don't know about Venezuela. I've never really had interest in Venezuela. I can't tell you what happens in that country. Forgive my ignorance. But for a fact, it looks like there's a really, really huge political interest in whatever is happening there. So we're going to be looking at that and looking at the political situation there, and of course, in comparison to the African political situation that we're seeing. Yeah, but before that, let us start with China. So China and 26 African countries agreed on a deal to strengthen partnership in the digital field. So they were participating in the forum, the African forum. It was called the China, what was it called? The Forum on China Africa Digital Cooperation. It was hosted on Monday by the Chinese Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, and it was being one of the people who led it was the Senegalese Minister of Telecommunication. One of the things that they agreed was that they are going to strengthen ties in digital transformation. And they said that they are going to train 1,000 professionals in the digital field from Africa. The deal that was signed was between China and 26 African countries to strengthen ties in ICT. And what is going to happen is we're going to have Chinese firms involved in creating network infrastructure in the continent. So they're creating something called a digital superhighway, and the Chinese is going to be involved in that. And the network infrastructure that the Chinese are looking at building in Africa, the 26 African countries, is going to benefit 900 million people. Somebody said that data is the new gold, and people, entities, corporations that matter, that control the things we do, are now more interested in data than they are interested in the resources that they used to be interested in. Because now with data, I can be able to control you. I can be able to access medical information of a certain country. I can be able to, with data, I can be able to access the backbone and the everything of a country. I can be able to access the voter registers. I can be able to access the biometrics. I can be able to access the DNA composition. I can be able to almost control everything. And Mark, we're living in a digital world right now. So now all of a sudden, China, for philanthropist reason, wants to help Africa build a network infrastructure that is going to connect 900 million people. This include the deployment of undersea cables by Chinese companies and the launch of data centers. Apparently, people still believe the Chinese want to help Africa for philanthropist reason. They're going to invest. They're going to invest. That is why I'm saying one of the things that really affect us is our naivety, our ignorance, because you believe a country is going to build an infrastructure that is going to serve 900 million people, including deploying undersea cables. You know how expensive that is. That connects 26 African countries, that is half of Africa. And apparently they don't have anything that they want from us. They're not demanding for anything. They just want to help Africa develop a digital infrastructure. So if you actually believe that, then shout out to you. That was China. And in Benin, as I had hinted earlier, about 7 security forces and 5 rangers were killed in a national park as jihadi attacks intensify. This is another case of sponsored chaos where you look at a country like Benin, you look at its mineral endowment, you look at its economic status, and you realize why it needs to be kept more and more, why they are struggling so much to keep it more and more poor, so they can be able to continue exploiting whatever is happening. And mark you know, these national parks have more than national parks in them. It's not always a national park, especially when it's a national reserve. There's always something reserved more than the animals. Don't know, these endangered rhinos. There's always more than the rhinos. So that was what happened in Benin. The jihadist attacks have been on the rise, as is many other African countries. I can name about 3/4 of Africa is going through the same jihadist attacks. These people killing these people for this reason, and this other one killing this other one for this reason, and the perpetrator of the war getting rich from the same. The same is happening in Sudan, where the top military official in Sudan, that is the commander, General Abdel Fattah Burhan, survived a drone attack. And he was attacked during a military graduation ceremony, and the attack killed 5 people. There have been talks about the Sudan war coming to an end. The war has been between the Rapid Support Forces and the government forces, which it started many years ago, just intensified last year when fightings broke in Khartoum, if you can remember, that time when the US was evacuating all its members. So at around that time, and now after the war has been on for all those years, they started having talks about a ceasefire in Sudan, with talks happening in Geneva. Talks spearheaded by who? The UN. The UN has been spearheading talks on the same thing, talk about ending the war in Sudan. And apparently, in the middle of the peace talks, they're still trying to assassinate, I don't know who, they're still trying to assassinate the top military officials. That is how they try to assassinate the top commander in Sudan. His name is General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. So there were 2 drones that attacked in Gibeit. Gibeit is a town in eastern Sudan. And after the ceremony, it was a graduation ceremony. After it ended, that was when the attacks happened, that they killed 5 people, but they did not kill the target, who was the top military official. Yesterday, I reported on Ethiopia floating its currency so that it can access a loan by by the World Bank. So after they floated their currency yesterday, today the World Bank approved the loan to Ethiopia. That fast. Not just a loan, it's a 1.5 billion USD loan. That is after Ethiopia has messed up its currency. That is when the World Bank comes in and offers the loan, of course, because now the people of Ethiopia, the 1.5 billion is not going to help them in any way. By the time they convert it to Ethiopian birrs and then they convert it back to the US dollar to pay, it will be 2 billion. So it approved the 1.5 billion financing for Ethiopia's budget, and it is the first time Ethiopia has received such money. Ethiopia is, by the way, the second most populous country in Africa, and it received another 3.4 billion from the IMF on Monday. The World Bank gave it 1.5 billion. That is what happens when you do what they tell you. You are showered with money, like Ethiopia is getting showered with money. 3.5 billion from that side, 1.5 billion from this other side. Yep, just because it accepted to float its currency, which is going to see its economy really messed up for some time. But anyway, the people who got the loan do not really care about the economy, because the economy is going to affect the people at the bottom of the pyramid, and they are not at the bottom of the pyramid, and they're going to be billionaires from the loans. So they really wouldn't expect them to care one bit about that or anything else. But that is what is going to happen. And talking about DRC and Burundi, going on to other news, Angola announced a ceasefire deal between DR Congo and Rwanda. Angola, it was on Tuesday that they announced that there was a ceasefire agreement between the DRC and Rwanda. This is after a meeting between the foreign ministers of Rwanda and DRC that was hosted by Angolan president. His name is Joao Lourenco at the presidential palace in the capital, Luanda. So there's been, if you can remember well, Kinshasa has been accusing Kigali of backing the March 23 rebels fighting the army, especially in North Kivu. Something that Rwanda denies, but they agreed a ceasefire. Rwanda denies that it is backing the M23 rebels, which I know it is, only that it backs them through somebody else. I mean, they're not the main financiers, but the financiers uses Rwanda as a gate through to DRC. I have no doubt on that. So they agreed a ceasefire. This is after they had a meeting in Luanda, and of course, how I can smell PR from this is not a war that was started in Angola, so it's not a war that can be ended in Angola. The powers that control the Rwandanese war are too big for Angola. The UN said that it found 4,000 Rwandan soldiers fighting alongside the M23 rebels, and that Kigali had de facto control of the group's operation. Nobody doubts anymore that the March 23 gets backing, support, and everything from Rwanda. Only that it's not Rwanda that is the original perpetrator. It's somebody uses Rwanda for the same. Anyway, that was what was happening throughout the whole of Africa, with 7 killed in Benin. Sudan, the Sudanese top military chief almost getting assassinated, with the World Bank approving a 1.5 billion loan in financing for Ethiopia. This is after the IMF approved a 3.4 billion, with Angola announcing a ceasefire agreement between the DRC and Rwanda, with China set to build a digital infrastructure in Africa that is going to serve 900 million people and cut across 26 African countries, with of course, nearly 50 Wagner fighters killed in an ambush in Mali. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. This has been the updates with me, Dimori. It's always a pleasure. See you tomorrow. Much love.